My entitled teacher shows some clear and obvious favoritism, as she is constantly giving me good grades while giving my friend horrible grades despite us turning in basically the same work. So me and my friend decided to get some revenge for not only exposing her for being a horrible teacher, but also by getting the school board to fire her on the spot. And I honestly have never felt better about getting back at somebody in my life. Here's what happened. Many years ago in my senior year of high school, I was placed in an English class with a close friend of mine. We'll call him Jack for the sake of the story. And being in a class with Jack was extremely exciting. The only issue was that our teacher, who we'll call Mrs. Smith, was known for being absolutely horrible and targeting students that she didn't like. A few weeks into the class, Jack and I started to realize that he was getting lower grades on assignments where our work was practically identical. Since he was such a close friend, this really pissed me off, especially because it was obvious that Mrs. Smith wasn't even reading my assignments. I would consistently get 100%, while Jack's grades would come back anywhere from 60% to 80% for no apparent reason. I even tried to edit and revise his work before submitting it, thinking that maybe my teacher just liked my writing style compared to him. This, of course, changed nothing and cemented the fact that she gave him worse grades solely because she didn't like him. This continued to happen throughout the entire semester, and at this point, I had a 100% in the class, while Jack had somewhere around a C-. Since I was already guaranteed to get an A, I decided to do something pretty stupid in hindsight, but Jack and I still laugh about it to this day. One of our last assignments was to write a report on a movie of our own choosing, but instead of doing that, I decided to write out the lyrics of First Day Out by T. Grizzly repeatedly until it hit the 4-page requirement for the assignment. And if you're unfamiliar with the song, it is extremely vulgar and has no place in an academic environment. Well, back, I received an A+ once again, while Jack got a B-. The next day, Jack and I went to the principal's office and presented our grades, giving concrete proof that Mrs. Smith unfairly graded students. Now, the principal was obviously shocked and said that they would look into it. A few weeks later, the semester was wrapping up, and we still hadn't heard anything about Mrs. Smith until my graduation counselor informed me that the school board had reviewed my assignment and were moving forward with firing her. Apparently, this was one of the many complaints she had received over the years, and my assignment was the straw that broke the camel's back. Well, the next semester, Mrs. Smith had been replaced with a substitute teacher, and to my knowledge, she no longer works at the school. Okay, this is crazy because I cannot understand why teachers do this. Just because you like or dislike a student should not change the fact of whether or not they landed the grade they deserve. Like, seriously, this guy was quoting lyrics from a vulgar song, and he somehow got an A+. Meanwhile, Jack is probably pulling his hair out trying to figure out, like, wait, what am I doing wrong? How am I not getting an A? Like, are you kidding me right now? So seriously, I love the way you got this teacher fired, because if anybody deserved that, it absolutely was her. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. My parents, after having disowned me for several years, have now reached out to me explaining that my mother has cancer, and after dealing with their awful treatment towards me for so many years, I'm hesitant to step back into their lives as I'm afraid that they're going to try and control mine all over again. Here's what happened. My parents disowned me last year, and it's now been a little over a year, and unfortunately, this isn't the first time. They also disowned me 2 years ago for a few months. They came back to talk to me, and at first, it seemed like things were smoothed over, but of course, they absolutely weren't. Now, a bit about my parents. My father mistreated my mother for most of my life. She was always in his shadow, and we lived in fear, but that was considered okay because we had enough money, we went on vacations, and had everything material that we needed. Besides being physically mistreated, I wasn't fully aware of how deep the psychological scars were until I met my long-term boyfriend. Being with him helped me realize just how problematic my parents' behavior towards me was. Daily control, constant belittling, treating me like I was 12 when I was actually 20 years old. For the first time, I started standing up for myself and behaving like an adult. At first, things were fine between them and my boyfriend, but that changed over time. My boyfriend and I went through rough patches, arguments, and even breakups, but we worked through them together. The first big issue arose when my boyfriend moved in with me in the city where we lived. This didn't align with my father's standards, meaning that we didn't ask for his permission in person at his house, even though we did call him. My boyfriend took over paying rent so that my parents wouldn't have any control over me, as I was still a student at the time. Later, we decided to leave the city and move to a more rural area where my boyfriend inherited a house that needed some work. We wanted to fix it up and make it our home, and that's when my parents disowned me again. Eventually, they came back, and after a lot of back and forth, we reconciled. But after some time, they started another cycle of manipulation and mistreatment, insulting where I lived, mocking me, saying I'd be stuck taking care of livestock, and I would become a dumb country girl, all despite my education. They called me worthless, said my boyfriend had me under his control, and that he probably had me on some kind of substance, and the list just goes on and on. During this, my boyfriend and I had a huge argument, and I decided to leave the house. There was a lot of yelling, but no violence. Well, my parents came to get me, and I moved back in with them, and they were overjoyed. Everything was fine for a while until my boyfriend reached out to my father, trying to explain that he was the one who suggested I leave because our living conditions were not ideal. We had no heating, no bathroom, etc. But my father refused to listen and got even angrier, saying my boyfriend had no right to call him. My boyfriend then called me and I went to see him. I wanted to bring him home so that we could all talk properly, but my father said my boyfriend could only kiss his feet before getting kicked out. He told me I had two choices: walk out the door and never return, or stay and block my boyfriend completely. So I panicked, had a breakdown, and blocked my boyfriend, who had been waiting outside for me. For a month, we had no contact. I moved in with my sister in a bigger town near where my boyfriend lived. One day, he came to her place just to hand me a letter and see me one last time. And that's when I unblocked him and we started talking occasionally. After a while, I realized I wanted to try again with him. But when I told my parents, they said they would disown me again. They claimed that he would hit me, throw me out like a dog, and that I would end up homeless. And then they started cursing me out. But I just stayed silent. Then I realized, wait a second, why do they think they can forbid a 23-year-old woman from seeing or reconciling with her partner? It was insane. Meanwhile, they either treated me like a princess or a servant. One moment they would say, you don't have to cook, you've cooked enough. And then they would say, well, why don't you cook? You're just sitting around. If I did end up cooking, they would say, oh, what, just for one meal? And if I cooked more, they would say, that's nothing. My sister started spying on me and gave me a cleaning schedule. And my parents showed up unannounced twice a week. That's when I fully realized how sick our relationship was. How it wasn't normal for someone to control a grown woman's life. What if I wanted to move or change jobs? Would they think they had the right to decide for me? Just like my whole childhood, where I lived in their shadow, afraid to even breathe differently for fear of their reaction. So I told them I was getting back together with him. Their response was to say, you'll only enter this house again in a coffin or in a stretcher. They then called me an addict. They said I'm mentally ill and cursed everything that they ever gave me and told me that their doors were closed forever, even if my boyfriend hurt me or threw me out on the street. But I just simply said, okay. Within days, I moved out completely. And it was then that they told everybody not to talk to me. They bothered my grandparents, checked their phones, monitored their messages, and yelled at them. My aunts eventually reached out, and when I saw my mother at a family wedding, I nodded at her, but she ignored me completely. My sister also cut off contact because I told her I wouldn't call her just to avoid being bothered, but that I'd always answer if she called me. And the one time that she called me, I missed her call and she never called again. My grandparents secretly came to see me, but later my father found out because he has people in the village watching me. But with all that in mind, this is where the twist comes into play. My mother has cancer. She had her uterus removed and she's now recovering. My grandparents are pushing for us to reconcile, and they accidentally gave her my new phone number. My parents are also now claiming they have no issue with my boyfriend anymore. I understand why my grandparents want peace, but I can't erase everything that they said to me or the year I spent completely alone. During this time, my boyfriend and I have struggled with rising costs and inflation, but we made our choice and that's fine. But still, every time I think of my parents, I feel nothing but anger. A few days ago, my mother messaged me. She said to me, I think enough time has passed and it would be nice to meet and talk. I've been at home resting, so why not? If you feel the same, let me know. I replied by saying, I heard what happened and I hope you recover soon. If you want to talk, we can, but I don't see where that conversation would lead. Time alone will not erase everything that was said to me without a good reason. She responded by saying, it wasn't right on either side. If you want to talk, let me know. And that response infuriated me. I haven't replied in 10 days. I never insulted them or responded to any of their words, but they trashed my name and disrespected me entirely. Now, I thought that was the end of it, but today she messaged me again, asking to meet in a nearby town. My boyfriend says I should go since it can't get any worse, and I am considering it just to put an end to their constant calls and messages and to hear what they have to say. But the idea makes me deeply uncomfortable and very anxious. I avoid conflict and I don't know how to handle it. I'm afraid they'll manipulate me again and I will end up back in the same cycle. So what do you think? I know this is a lot and you don't have the full picture, but please help me gain some kind of perspective. Everyone around me just says do what you think is right, or just ask me if I could live with never seeing them again if something happened to them. But I don't even know how to deal with what's happening now, let alone any hypothetical future situation. I feel lost and overwhelmed. It seems so unfair that everyone expects me to make the effort, to visit, to talk, to lower my pride, when in the end I was the only one who was hurt by them. Because right now I really don't know what to do. Honestly, I think considering the circumstances, I can only speak to what I would do, and I know in my situation, I would not be very open to talking to them, especially after the way they treated you. Like seriously, these people have been trying to control your life from the very beginning, and they go through these same phases where they're like, oh yeah, you're doing fine, and then suddenly when you do something that they don't explicitly like, they turn around and act like this is the end of the world. Like they literally disowned you twice already. Who's to say they wouldn't do that a third time the second you step back into their life? So for me, I would weigh things out and be like, okay, is it worth it in the end to talk to these people, or am I just gonna be happier by avoiding them and moving on? Because as far as I'm concerned, the way they're talking to you and the way they've treated you in the past is something that you absolutely need to be aware of. Because in my opinion, it seems like this cycle is starting all over again, and you very easily could be walking right back into their grasp. Am I the jerk for leaning on a nearby wall after being denied use of gym equipment by a woman doing supersets? Because after I asked her if I could work in, she said that I couldn't and that I couldn't be in her space in a public gym. And I'm honestly so annoyed by this interaction that I just don't know what to do. Here's what happened. Okay, so my apartment building has a small exercise area, including a cable crossover machine, an adjustable bench, some dumbbells, some treadmills, and a small side room for yoga or other bodyweight or kettlebell exercises. The gym was empty this morning, except for one woman doing row exercises on the cable crossover machine, and I noticed that she had placed her phone next to the bench with a couple of dumbbells. For context, I'm a fairly tall guy, and she's kind of short, and I specify this because it seems like that plays into the dynamic from her perspective. So I ask her, can I use that bench? But she responds by saying, no, I'm doing supersets. Now, I was a bit taken aback. There is room for 2, maybe 3 people in the resistance and weight training area, and she was using every piece of equipment. Not sure what to do, I lean on a nearby wall, and I start looking at my phone. Now, I'm a bit upset, and I look up every so often to see when she'll be gone. She then takes out her earphones and says something to the effect of, are you just going to stand there? And then we get into a big argument. I say something to the effect of, what else am I supposed to do? You won't let me work in. She then says to me, I don't want you in my space. Go do something else. But I replied by saying, oh, so I can't do pull-ups on the cable crossover while you're using the bench? She then says back to me, no, I don't want you in my space. But I replied by saying, well, that's just bad etiquette. It then continues like this for a bit, and I accuse her of being rude, but she accuses me of using my male privilege. Eventually, she finishes her set and then she leaves. In every single gym I've worked out at, it would be considered rude to bogart multiple pieces of equipment while others have to wait. I lived abroad for years before this, but is this still the case in the United States gym culture? Am I the jerk for leaning on a nearby wall and just waiting, rather than going and stretching or running on the treadmill? Because right now, I seriously don't know what to do. Okay, I can confidently say that the lady in this story is super entitled and very rude. Seriously, you can't just take up a bunch of space and be like, no, I don't want you near me, back off. Like, this is not a private gym. This is a place that anybody in the apartment building can go to and work out. So for her to be like, no, you can't be over here, that's not allowed, while also making a big fuss over you standing there and just waiting for this idiot to be done, like, that is so weird and honestly so toxic. So no, you didn't do anything wrong, and in my opinion, you were completely in the right for standing there and waiting for this idiot to stop. My girlfriend has been secretly visiting my awful parents who mistreated me my entire childhood. And after I found out about this, I honestly felt like my whole world crumbled down, as I am now reconsidering my entire relationship, leaving me in a spot where I seriously don't know what to do. Here's what happened. To start things out, I did not have an easy time growing up. My childhood was so messed up that I sort of just put it all in a mental box, and I left it at that. Needless to say, I left my parents as soon as I could, and then went no contact and haven't seen them ever since then. There are several reasons I went no contact, and my girlfriend seemed understanding enough when I told her that I didn't even want to tell my parents about their grandson. I don't want my son around these people, I don't want my girlfriend around these people, and above all, I would never leave any child alone around these people. My girlfriend doesn't know about what exactly my father did to me and my sister, but I also feel like she doesn't have to know in order to respect my wishes. Well, yesterday, my sister texted me a picture of our parents' dog, and in the background were my son's shoes. Our mother uploaded it on Facebook, where I have them blocked, and while my sister recognized the shoes, she was mainly concerned about them even having a kid over there. My girlfriend and I both work. She only works part-time, but we always have someone to watch our child, either my sister or my girlfriend's family. So it's not like she had to bring him there to have someone watch him, meaning that this was a deliberate decision that she should have made with me. I talked to my son about it, and it turns out he's been there several times unsupervised alone with my father. Apparently nothing happened, but I was understandably angry and confronted my girlfriend as soon as she got back home, which of course led to a huge fight. She left crying and went to her parents' house, and later her mother came to pick up my son, which I refused, which then led to another fight with her mom as well. Well, my girlfriend then texted me, asking to talk later today, and I know I can't keep my son from her, and I definitely don't want to, but I do not want to go into our conversation unprepared, so honestly, any advice is welcome. I also feel betrayed and still very angry, and I'm honestly ready to break up over this, but my son is very upset and anxious because he heard our fight, and right now I'm just completely at a loss and I don't know how to handle this situation. Before we go any further, the original poster has an update to their situation. Here's what they had to say. First of all, I want to thank you all for the comments and the input. I didn't feel like I could even think when I made my initial post, so it was good getting some different perspectives. Now, I did write that my girlfriend and I would talk that same day that I posted, but we didn't because I needed to sort myself out, and I think she did too. She's been avoiding me ever since and requested we talk at her parents' place, but I didn't want that, so we didn't get to talk until yesterday while my son was at my sister's. Apparently in September last year, my mother reached out to my girlfriend on Facebook asking how me and my son were doing. My mother is a very intelligent woman, but also highly manipulative. She convinced my girlfriend to visit them because my father is ill. My girlfriend said that she didn't tell me because she knew I would say no, and she wanted to see what kind of people my parents were. She brought our son but didn't leave him alone at first, but their visits got fairly regular, and she became comfortable with leaving him with my parents. Now he seemed fine, and he even seemed to like it there, so she didn't feel like he was in any kind of danger. The first time she left my son fully alone was when she went Christmas shopping. I think from what I had told her about my childhood home, she expected a house of nightmares, but according to her, the place was clean and fixed up. The dog was healthy and my parents were nice. The thing is that she knew something happened to my sister. I never told her what happened to me, which I now see I probably should have, but she doesn't see terrible people like them everywhere like I do. And when my son didn't report anything negative, she saw no issue taking him and leaving him there again. So it's pretty clear to me that she doesn't know anything about being mistreated as a kid, or even what to look out for. I don't understand how she could think that she'd be able to spot any of the signs with this little knowledge. My father has been in contact with children most of my life, and while I don't know if he's done anything to them, my sister always said that he knew how to make children feel at ease. Both of my parents are very methodical and calculating, so I don't blame her for believing them, but I blame her for not discussing this with me. She went to visit them after talking to my mother for a few days, and meanwhile, I've lived there for 17 years, and somehow she thought that she knew better than me. Even when I told her some details about my childhood, she still tried to push for supervised visits, saying my father was ill, and my son had every right to meet his grandparents, which I don't agree with at all. The thought of children being around these people makes me sick, but she seems reluctant to agree to officially limit their visitation rights. I would need her agreement, however, unless I want a court case of some kind. I also tried to explain why this felt like such a betrayal, because this is not just about putting my son in danger, it's also about her going behind my back for months. I mean, what else would she be capable of? Then she told my son to keep the visits a secret, which is exactly what people who mistreat kids would say. Now, she did apologize, saying that she made an honest mistake and feels like I'm blowing this out of proportion and that her parents think so too. Besides, our son is fine, and I shouldn't have raised my voice at her mother and should be more grateful for what her parents have done for me and us over the years, which by the way I am. I do owe them, sure, but that doesn't mean that they can overrule my parenting decisions or get so involved. I feel like neither her nor her parents trust me or take me seriously, and it's so frustrating when the mother of your son is pretty much actively working against you. I don't think she can even grasp how terrified I was when I talked to my son about their visits. Again, I know it's my fault for not telling her everything, but I never thought she would do something like that. My past never really affected me much anyways. I never felt like there was ever a reason for her to know all the details. Honestly, I don't know if anything is resolved. I know why she made the choices she made, but I don't think she understands why I was and still am upset. She left after bringing up her mother because I got angry, and I know I shouldn't have, but I revealed something so big, and I just don't get taken seriously. I want us to work, and she agreed that it would take a lot of work to get back to before all of this, which I'm not sure is even possible. I apparently deeply upset her, and I scared our son, and I angered her family, and part of that is true. I never wanted to fight in front of my son. I think for me emotionally, all feelings for her vanished the moment I found out, so that's kind of where I'm at right now. I wish we can make it work for his sake, but I don't want him to grow up with dysfunctional parents, or with his parents fighting every day. So if this doesn't work out, I will need to get a lawyer. I'm willing to put in the work needed for us to stay together, but I've been doing a lot of thinking. We were so young when we started dating and had our son, and I'm not sure if I ever thought about us staying together forever. I only stayed because I was living with them, and then I stayed because I didn't want to be an awful teenage dad, abandoning my son and the girl that I loved, because I really did love her, I think. Also, I am partially responsible responsible for her being pregnant in the first place. As for my son, I have talked a lot to him these past few days, and I've taught him about boundaries and what's okay and what isn't. So I just hope it's true that nothing happened. He has also apparently not seen anything inappropriate. Our fight did get to him though, and he knows I was sad and knows his mom is too. And I hope him and I talked it out enough, and that my girlfriend gets to talk about this with him too. We might just sit down with him or something, but honestly, I need to figure this out because right now I don't know what to do. Wow, this is a big one. Like seriously, this is really messed up, and I absolutely side with the original poster. Like seriously, what was the girlfriend thinking? She had no right to bring these people back into the original poster's life, especially when he said, hey, we've gone no contact and I don't want to deal with them for like some really bad reasons. Like if I had a significant other who said that, I would be like, hey, I hear you loud and clear, don't even worry about it. I will never contact them, we will have a happy life without those people involved. Because my god, this is so messed up. So honestly, I think you're going about this in the best way you possibly could, because I know for a fact if I was in your shoes, I would be very pissed off. And hopefully for the sake of your son, all of this works out in his favor, because he does not deserve to be stuck in the middle of all of this. An entitled Karen freaks